Last season, Marc Gasol got emotional playing in Memphis for the first time as a visitor. It was a tough decision for the Grizz to trade him to the Raptors in 2019 because he literally grew up in Memphis. He went to high school there when his brother Pau was a rookie. But the Raptors were on a mission. They dealt 3 players and a second-round pick to upgrade at center on their road to winning a chip. 2 years earlier, the Pelicans tried to do the same thing. They dealt 3 players, including Buddy Hield, and 2 firsts for DeMarcus Cousins. That was one of the wildest trade deadline deals ever because Boogie found out in the middle of a press conference. But turns out that was the best part of the trade. Not only did the Pels miss the playoffs with Boogie and AD, but Cousins tore his Achilles a year later and never played again for the Pels. This year, fans are understandably excited about the trade deadline, but how much does it even really matter? Is the deadline worth all the hype, or do most trades just end up like that Boogie Cousins deal? This video dives deep on the NBA trade deadline to explain how important it actually is. The NBA has always had a trade deadline. The first deal was in 1947 when a kid from Akron, not that kid, some dude named Wendell Gray. He was dealt from St. Louis to Boston for a guy named Cecil Hankins. Of course, there'd be a guy named Cecil in a 1940s trade. But just like they didn't record rebounds or blocks back in the day for some reason, they didn't keep track of which trades happened in the middle of the season. That started in 1987. So from that point on, we know how important the trade deadline actually is. There have been just 15 impact players traded at the deadline in 34 years. And we will define impact as a guy who played at least 20 minutes for a finals team. This list shows 13 of 68 finals teams getting an impact player. That's just 19% of teams. It's even shorter if we talk NBA champions, 6 of 68 teams. And most of these players acquired at the trade deadline are role players, like PJ Tucker or George Hill. But there are even fewer stars. Pau Gasol, Rasheed Wallace, Clyde Drexler. That's it. I would also argue that the Raptors don't win in 2019 without Marc Gasol bothering Joel Embiid in the post, and shout out to PJ Brown. But if a team needs to change its trajectory at the trade deadline, they're probably just screwed to begin with. Today's video is sponsored by Fission Energy Drinks, and I was super happy when they reached out because I have drank energy drinks for a long time, and there have been like 50 million different brands that have come out in that time. And I'm always looking when I see one of these new brands for 3 things. Number 1 is price. Number 2 is the way it tastes. But number 3 is the amount of caffeine that it has. And a lot of these new brands know that, so they advertise. We have 150 milligrams of caffeine. We have 300 milligrams. And that's frustrating because I'm not always looking to like drink an entire pot of coffee in my energy drink. And so Fission sent me a box. And first of all, the packaging is beautiful. And you open it up and you see all their different kinds of flavors. The one that I gravitated to is called Florida Man. Because, you know, I just moved from Florida, and that dude can get pretty crazy. It's really easy to use. You've got the bottle that you fill up with water, and then you have the cartridge, right? And so you put the cartridge on. I'm almost done with this one. On the top, it's got a dial, and you just twist the dial to what strength you want, right? So if you go all the way up to 9, it's literally got over 500 milligrams of caffeine. But I don't want that, right? I'm gonna put it down to like 4. Florida Man is legit. So with the settings, this cartridge is like 4 energy drinks, and they're each $4. So that's $1 an energy drink. Again, I am an energy drink veteran. This stuff is awesome. Go down below in the description and click the link for 10% off your first order. Thanks again to Fission. When you look even closer at the trade deadline, you see what the actual impact is for most NBA teams. First, you have to look at motivation. Some teams trade guys to clear cap space. In 2011, the Clippers regretted that they paid Baron Davis $65 million, so they did something that changed NBA history. Baron was dealt to the Cavaliers at the deadline for 2 role players and an unprotected first-round pick. And don't worry, that pick only has a 2.8% chance of being number 1. Wait, what? Yeah, it happened to be number 1 in the 2011 draft. So the Cavaliers selected Kyrie Irving. With that, they built a team that LeBron wanted to come back to, and it opened a point guard spot on the Clippers for Chris Paul. All because of some stupid team owner who made some hasty move at the trade deadline because he wanted to clear cap space. Another motivation at the trade deadline is to chase a deep playoff run by a pretty good team, right? Like, we're missing that final piece. In 2017, the Nets traded Bojan Bogdanovic to the Wizards for cap filler and a protected first-round pick. Yeah, the Wizards, they didn't really do much, but that first-round pick became Jarrett Allen, who is now a $100 million player and was key for the Nets getting James Harden from Houston. Or another motivation is for a GM to save his job by making the team temporarily better. This happened to the Pistons in 2018 when Stan Van Gundy was both leading the front office and was the head coach. With zero regard for the team's future, he acquired Blake Griffin on a max contract who already had injury history for Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, Boban, can you believe he traded Boban, a second and a first. That became Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The point is, there's multiple motivations for making deadline deals, but most of the time, they are panic moves that put a team back for years. So am I saying that the trade deadline is basically overhyped and good for nothing? No, actually. It's actually a lot like the draft, where on the actual draft night, we think we know who all the guys are and where they should go, but then when we look back on it, we're like, oh, okay, I didn't even notice that guy down there who ended up having a huge impact. The best example for the trade deadline is 2012. The Nets were so sure that Gerald Wallace would fix their roster, they traded 2 players and a first-round pick. That pick became Damian Lillard. Without a deadline deal, the Blazers would not have gotten their best player in franchise history. The best deadline deals don't pay off right away. In 2008, the Lakers-Grizzlies deal was thought to be horribly lopsided. LA got Pau Gasol, who won a title the next year. Memphis got Kwame Brown, 2 picks, cap filler, and a young guy who everyone thought was trash at the time named Marc Gasol. He obviously ended up being a franchise legend, but no one knew that at the time. But my favorite example of this is in 2012. The Golden State Warriors decided to split up Monte Ellis and Steph Curry. Ellis was a part of the We Believe era, so it was tough to see him go, but they knew that it would be best for Steph and his development. What they didn't know was it would have a huge impact on Klay Thompson. Klay and Steph, without Monte in the backcourt, developed into the Splash Brothers. So it wasn't about who they brought back in that trade, Andrew Bogut and Steven Jackson. It was about how it changed their team chemistry. So what does this mean for this year's trade deadline? Well, it means that we're probably not going to see an impact trade for a contender. Forget the Suns, the Warriors, the Nets, or the Bucks making some huge deal that wins them the title. The best they can hope for is a role player like Milwaukee got with PJ Tucker. Instead, the trades that happen in the next few days will probably have a huge impact down the road. You never know when some random first-round pick that got thrown into a trade becomes Kyrie Irving or Damian Lillard. Most players are not going to impact winning this year, but they could win a ring eventually. I hate to say this because you guys love trade videos, especially on this channel, but the deadline is not worth all the hype surrounding it. Usually it is the under-the-radar, less talked about parts of the deadline that actually matter. Speaking of under the radar, guys, check out this video about 5 teams that could sneak all the way up the standings and win the title. I know that that sounds crazy, underdog teams winning the championship. We've seen it with the Bucks, the Raptors, whatever, but this year especially, with all the COVID stuff and the injuries, I just feel like there are certain teams whose record actually doesn't reflect how good of a team they are. There are 5 teams that are underdogs that could win it all.